The group set is the collective term for the gears and brakes on your bike, and Shimano is the world's largest manufacturer of these components, meaning that if you're buying a new bike, chances are it's going to have Shimano on it. That said, there are loads of different types, ranging from entry-level stuff straight through to professional grade level components. So Shimano has asked us to make a handy guide to explain the performance differences between all the different bits and tell you everything that you need to know so that you can decide what best suits your needs. Before we go any further, if you like our content and find it useful, then why not consider liking and subscribing, as it really does help support the channel and help us develop and improve the content we make. So first, onto the group set, let's define what the different bits are. You've got the shifters. Now these change gear and also apply the brakes. Next, you've got the derailleurs, front and rear. These change the gears on your bike, either on the chain set in the case of the front one or on the cassette in the case of the back one. Some group sets only have a rear derailleur, but Shimano road sets have a front and a rear. You've also got the chain, the cassette, the chain set, and the brake calipers. These can either be rim brake or disc brake, but most modern bikes now are disc brake. Group sets exist in a hierarchy, and as you move up the hierarchy to the professional grade stuff at the top, the components tend to get lighter and more sophisticated, but also more expensive. Now Shimano makes a gravel specific group set called GRX, and it also makes a full range of mountain bike group sets. But for the purposes of this video, and not to make it too long, we're focusing exclusively on the road cycling group sets. But if you want to find out more about the mountain bike group sets, Doddy on GCNTech has made a brilliant video, so you can go and check out that. We're going to start at the top of the hierarchy, and top of the tree is this Dura-Ace. It's the best of the best. It's used by professional riders to race the Tour de France, but also amateur racers and just hardcore cycling enthusiasts. And its main features are electronic shifting, also known as DI2. This gives really rapid but also precise and consistent gear changes. You've got hydraulic disc brakes too, and just an extensive use of exotic materials that provide high strength and low weight. For example, if you look at the rear derailleur cage, that's carbon fibre. The shifter levers, they're carbon fibre too. And even these pins on the chain, they're hollow, all trying to keep the weight down. The mechanical internals of the shifter levers, they're titanium alloy too. The cassette is actually a carbon composite spider, and then onto that are titanium alloy sprockets. And there's even titanium bolts here in the mechs, all to keep the weight down to a minimum. And speaking of the cassette, one of the key details on Dura-Ace is that it's now 12 speed, meaning there are 12 individual sprockets or gears on the cassette block there, and it goes up to a maximum ratio of 11, that's the smallest one, up to 34, which is the biggest one. Now that range will become important when I tell you more about the other group sets. There are also high-tech bearing surface coatings which help reduce friction and extend the surface life. And then to improve your shifting, you've got a feature called Hyperglide Plus. This is to do with the special cuts and ramps that have been machined cut into this titanium alloy cassette to improve the shifting. New bikes fitted with Dura-Ace Di2 are typically around the 10 grand mark, maybe even more, but the quality and performance of the shifting is absolutely outstanding. The total weight for the group set is around 2,438 grams quoted, but bear in mind that does change depending on the exact setup you have. So for example, if you use the bigger or smaller cassette, different size brake rotors, or different size chain rings and chain sets. Next tier down, and we've got Ultegra. We're not going to spend as much time talking about Ultegra because it has the same functionality as Dura-Ace. All the mechanical parts are the same size and the internal electronics are the same too. The shifting performance is nigh on identical to Dura-Ace, but the materials used aren't quite as exotic, resulting in it being slightly heavier, but not by much, only 278 grams. And yes, like Dura-Ace, it's 12 speed. So whereas Dura-Ace is the pro racing group set, you could describe Ultegra as the racers group set. Next up, we've got Shimano 105. Yep, 105, the group set of the people. Now, we refer to it as that because amongst keen cyclists and enthusiasts, this is the most popular, and for good reason. It's got excellent performance, it's really capable, and offers good value. It's good enough for getting into road racing, doing time trials, Gran Fondos, epic rides, sportives, you name it. If you're getting into cycling and buying your first serious road bike, if your budget stretches to 105, I'd say go for it. And one of the reasons for that is the shifting quality on 105 is absolutely superb. In the previous version, when it was mechanical 11-speed, we did a blindfold test with 11-speed mechanical Dura-Ace, and we couldn't tell the difference. It was that good. 105 now is 12-speed, and it's also become electronic, just like the Dura-Ace Di2. But although at the time of making this video, the less expensive 11-speed mechanical 105 with rim brakes remains in production and is still available. Now, the cassette on 105 marks a significant difference from the Dura-Ace cassette. Firstly, it's available in a bigger range, so you can get this from 11 to 36, and that's because 105's aimed at enthusiasts and more recreational riders than the pro-level Dura-Ace, and so Shimano makes slightly easier gears for those riders. It's noticeably heavier too and features a steel alloy rather than titanium. The rotors at 105 level are a noticeable difference too, so they don't feature the same cooling fins that you get on the top of the line Dura-Ace XTR rotor that you can see here, and as a result they don't dissipate heat quite as effectively. You guessed it, it's also noticeably heavier, but it does still feature a sandwich construction of alloys to help with that heat dissipation. The rear derailleur features a slightly longer cage for that bigger cassette. It does have the same internals and workings as the top-end Dura-Ace one. It's just in a bulkier and slightly heavier casing to help keep the cost down. The front mech, however, that doesn't have the same internals as the latest Dura-Ace and Ultegra group sets. It borrows the internals from the previous generation, the 11-speed, and so consequently the front mech shifting isn't so quite as fast as the latest Ultegra and Dura-Ace. Another interesting detail on the shifter is that you don't have the little hidden button in the top of the shifter that you do on Dura-Ace and Ultegra, but what you do have is two coin cell batteries in the wireless shifters. So the shifters on Dura-Ace, Ultegra and 105 are wireless, and they communicate wirelessly with the derailleurs, which are wired together. And normally they have a single coin cell battery in the shifters to power them, but the 105 ones have two coin cell batteries, so the battery life is twice the length, almost 3 years, Shimano reckons. Something that's always happened with the Shimano group set hierarchy over the years is what's known as trickle down. So the cutting edge tech that's developed for Dura-Ace eventually trickles down and makes its way into more affordable group sets like 105. And the fact that now 105 is Di2 electronic and 12 speed is a great example of that. Now, in terms of weight though, it's 550 grams heavier than Dura-Ace, so about half a kilo, and just 360 grams heavier than Ultegra. You could typically expect to pay £1,500 to £2,000 for a bike, a full bike that came fitted with the older 11-speed mechanical 105. The Di2 12-speed version is more expensive, and you're probably looking at around half the price of what you'd expect to pay for a Dura-Ace bike to get the 105 Di2. But half the price, it definitely isn't half the performance. And that's why 105 for us represents the best value group set. If you look at the 105 chain, there's some interesting visual differences to, say, the Dura-Ace one. So firstly, the pins are now solid, so it's a little bit heavier. They're not the hollow pins on the Dura-Ace. And then something you can't see is actually the surface coating of the metal plates and rollers on the chain. It's not as expensive, it's not as low friction, it's not as hard wearing as the Dura-Ace chain, and that's one of the differences. Next in the hierarchy is Tiagra. Headlines of Tiagra are that it is 10 speed, so 10 sprockets on the cassette, and it's available in different chain set options than the group sets above it. So all the others are double chain set options, whereas Tiagra has the double and also a triple chain set option should you need it for easier gears. chain set features a similar 4-bolt crank arm design to the Groupsets above it, and the cranks themselves are hollow tech as well. Again, another example of that trickle-down technology. It's available in rim or disc brake versions, and it's actually Shimano's entry-level group set into hydraulic disc brakes, which is arguably its biggest selling point, because the difference between hydraulic disc brakes and rim brakes or mechanical disc brakes is huge. The Tiagra hydraulic brakes aren't quite as sophisticated as the Ultegra and Dura-Ace ones though. They don't feature certain things such as the servo wave technology, which allows them to have a bit more modulation and a bit more feel. A very noticeable performance difference is the shape of the hydraulic levers on Tiagra. They're much bulkier than the ones found on the 105 Ultegra and Dura-Ace. They're much smaller in your hand, and consequently some people find the Tiagra ones a bit less comfortable. You can get the lever blade though in a shorter length, which is useful for people who have smaller hands or maybe children. The Tiagra chain set goes up to a 52-36, so there's no race-focused gears here, no 53-39 like you can get on Ultegra and Dura-Ace, and the cassette goes from an 11 to a 32 as your biggest potential gear. One nice modification on the latest Tiagra though is that the cables from the shifters are now internalized and go routed underneath the bar tape or through the handlebar, which makes the front end of your bike look much neater. Again, this is a great example of the trickle-down technology. It's something we first saw in Dura-Ace many years ago, and it's finally made its way into Tiagra. The previous generation had the cables popping out of the side. Next is Shimano Sora R3000. My first proper road bike had Shimano Sora on it, and it was brilliant. Like Tiagra before it, it is mechanical and it's available in both rim brake and disc brake versions. Although, as I alluded to with Tiagra, the disc brakes on Sora are mechanically cable operated. They're not hydraulic. And as a result, the performance of them, the power, is less, and the feel and modulation is noticeably less too. They're much more on-off in their operation when you pull the lever, compared to that progressive feel that you get with hydraulics. Sora is 9-speed with respect to the cassette. Fun fact for you, roadies didn't get 9-speed until 1996 when it came out on the then Dura-Ace. So another example of trickle down. God, you're probably going to be sick of me saying trickle down now. Anyway, the cassette itself is available in a range of different options. So the smallest one is an 11-25, which is quite a close ratioed cassette, and it goes up to an 11-32 cassette for the biggest gears. So that actually wasn't available in 1996 on Dura-Ace. That was deemed too easy for Dura-Ace. Oh, how times have changed. And that's thanks to the rear mech, which is here. So it can go 32 now because the rear mech on Sora has this nice long cage which helps facilitate that 32 cog. Now, although the cassette goes to 32, because you've only got 9 gears, it means the gaps are bigger between those gears compared to a 12-speed cassette. And consequently, you can feel sometimes like the jumps between individual gears when you've got that bigger range can be quite big and not as smooth. The cassette is noticeably heavier than the other ones. It's not on this carrier lightweight spider that you get on some of the higher end ones, and it's made from pressed steel. It does though have the Hyperglide features on there to help improve the shifting between the gears. You can see the little ramps all over the cassette, but overall the gear shifting is not quite as fast, it's not quite as precise, it's not quite as smooth as the higher end group sets, particularly the electronic ones. The design of the front derailleur is a good example of this. So you see it features this long arm here that articulates the movement of the front derailleur. This design actually came from Dura-Ace and Ultegra mechs from about 10 years ago, but because of the length of that arm, it's quite a long pivot, and that results in when you push the shifter lever, you actually have to push it quite a long way in. It's not a major thing, but it is noticeable over more modern derailleur designs where you don't have to push the shifter as much to achieve a shift. Something really nice about the latest version of Sora though is the shape of these levers. it's come from the higher end group sets before it. So again, you've like the Tiagra, you've got the cables now, they can be run internally, they don't pop out the side of the lever, you can run them through your bars, makes your bike look so much neater and nicer. But also the shape of these levers in the hand, they're just much more compact, and they do sort of feel pretty similar to like the high-end ones now. It's just obviously the materials and internals used are less sophisticated materials and a bit heavier. And onto the chain set, you know, it features a 4-bolt crank arm design like the other group sets, but the crank arms themselves, they're like a forged design, so they're considerably heavier. There are different chain set options available, but you really do notice the weight of this compared to, you know, especially the 105 when I can hold them both here. So this one weighs around 1,140, 50 grams, depending on the size you get, whereas the 105 ones are around 750 grams. So, you know, 350 grams difference, that's a lot. And looking at the brakes, this kind of pivot design on the brake caliper is similar to what you would have got on, you know, 105 maybe 9 years ago. A key difference though is the actual brake pads themselves. These are a one-piece design, so when the pad wears out, you take the whole thing off and you can replace it, rather than the separate brake pad and shoe that you get on the more expensive brakes. You could actually fit brake pads and shoes from more expensive brakes into this if you wanted. It's just a cost-saving measure at the point of sale, so they keep the price of Sora down. But overall, Sora is a fantastic option for those who are wanting to get into road cycling, get a proper road bike, maybe tackle some events, and whose budget doesn't necessarily stretch to 105. That was exactly the boat I was in when I bought a bike with Sora on, and it served me incredibly well. And finally, we've reached the bottom of the Shimano hierarchy, where we find Claris. Now, Claris is Shimano's entry-level group set into road cycling. It's designed for beginners who want good quality components. We don't have it here, but you can see the images on screen. Now, the big difference between Shimano Claris and Shimano Sora is that it's now 8-speed rather than 9, and it's only available in rim brakes. There's no disc brake version. Again, following the trend for group sets in the hierarchy, Shimano Claris is heavier than the group sets before it, and the shifting isn't quite as precise or as slick. Part of that is down to it being 8-speed, so you can get an 1134 cassette for Claris for a nice big range and some easy gears for the hills, but being 8-speed, the jumps between those gears is noticeable and quite big. The internal workings of the gear shifters though are from previous generations of 105, and the cables are coated with a slick Teflon coating to help improve the smoothness of the shifts too. So there you have it, that's the rundown of Shimano's group sets. Just a couple of final points if you're in the market for a bike and you're not sure what you should get. If you're planning to commute on a bike and you're going to be locking it up publicly, I would highly recommend that you don't lock up anything in a public place that has components higher than Shimano's Sora level, as I just think it becomes too attractive a prospect for thieves. And I'd still be cautious locking it up even if it is in a secure car park area. The other thing is with Shimano Dura-Ace, it's fantastic. I mean, it's amazing to use, and it is the best of the best, but it is a case of diminishing returns. As mentioned previously, earlier in the video, Shimano 105, half the price, it definitely isn't half the performance. And if you want to see just how capable sort of all of the Shimano group sets are, then I'd highly recommend you checking out Connor's brilliant video on the Tour de Stations, which is an ultra fondo at 250 kilometers, over 9,000 meters elevation in a single ride. And he used Shimano Sora to do that ride, to prove the point of just how capable these components are, even at the entry level. Well, hopefully I've explained the main key differences between the different group sets for you, so that armed with this knowledge you can determine what's the best fit for you, but also factor in that chains and cassettes wear out, as do disc brake rotors, and the more expensive components are going to be more expensive to replace. So yeah, be sure to factor that into your budgeting. Now, right, I'm going to go now, but if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends if you've got any.